The room was cold. The soft beeping of machines echoed like a heartbeat, fading into silence. William Hartley, 72 years old, Boston's most reserved and reclusive billionaire, lay motionless. Tubes ran into his veins. An oxygen mask covered most of his face. He hadn't responded to treatment in nearly 2 weeks. Outside in the hallway, 3 doctors whispered in hushed voices, "He doesn't want to live anymore. Oh, ever since the fire took his wife and daughter, nothing has brought him back. Not even his fortune." And then a voice rose. Not a nurse, not a PA announcement, but a young black girl, no more than 10, barefoot, standing beside the hospital bed in a faded gray hoodie that hung loosely from her bony shoulders. Her thick, unruly curls fell over her wide, searching eyes. She looked like she hadn't had a full meal in days. But her voice, no instruments, no choir, just the hum of something sacred, soft and trembling. Shine a little light when the world grows cold. Breathe a little hope when your soul lets go. Each note floated through the air like a gentle wind brushing away the weight of death. William's finger twitched. A nearby nurse gasped. One of the doctors stepped in quickly, his expression tightening. "Did you see that?" Then came a cough. William's eyes fluttered open. And for the first time in days, the man who had surrendered to silence looked directly at the girl. No one knew who she was. No one understood how she got there. But what they did know, a girl sang with her whole heart, and a man who was nearly gone came back to life. That's where the story begins. 3 days earlier, New Orleans, Louisiana. In the middle of the crowded, chaotic Bywater market, a 10-year-old girl named Aaliyah Monroe weaved between rows of vendors, balancing a heavy sack of onions on her small head. Sweat rolled down her forehead beneath the sweltering southern Sunday. But she didn't complain. She was used to it. She had to be. Because 2 years ago, Aaliyah's world collapsed. Her parents, her father, a mechanic, her mother, a church singer, had died in a horrific car crash on the I-10 interstate. The car was mangled beyond recognition. The newspapers called it a death trap of twisted steel. And yet, Aaliyah was the only one who survived. Not a scratch on her. At first, the world called her a miracle. But in the poor neighborhood where she lived, not everyone believed in miracles. Aunt Denise, her mother's cousin and the last living relative, didn't see grace. She saw something else. No child survives something like that, unless there's something dark about her. That girl ain't right. So Aaliyah was turned away. No more bed, no more gentle voices calling her by name. She began sleeping beneath the Claiborne Avenue overpass, alongside other children who had nowhere else to go. By day, she carried loads for strangers at the market. By night, she curled up in her oversized hoodie, her mother's old hoodie, and disappeared into the shadows. But there was one thing Aaliyah never lost: her voice. Every night, when the city fell asleep, she sang. Not to earn money, not to be noticed. She sang to forget the hunger, to quiet the nightmares, and to feel close to her parents again. She sang for herself. She sang for them. Sometimes, a stranger passing by would stop in their tracks. Listen, cry. One older woman once knelt beside her, tears in her eyes, and placed $5 in her hand. "Child, your voice reached a place in me I thought I lost." But what no one knew was that Aaliyah carried a dream. She dreamed of standing beside a dying man. In the dream, her voice reached his soul. He opened his eyes, smiled, and placed a hand gently on her head. "You're stronger than you think. Since that dream, it had never left her. And maybe, just maybe, that's why, on a quiet Wednesday morning, with an empty stomach and worn-out shoes, Aaliyah walked through the gates of Boston General Hospital. Not to steal, not to beg, but because something deep inside her knew that dream was about to come true. The glass doors slid open as Aaliyah stepped into the main lobby of Boston General Hospital. The welcome mat was so clean she hesitated to step on it. Bright white lights beamed down. The silence, the sterile air, it felt like she had entered another world. A world without shouting vendors, without honking cars, without the chaos of the street. She was about to approach the front desk, hoping for a small gesture, a piece of bread, a coin, maybe even a kind smile. But then she heard something. A quiet conversation just behind a glass divider. "He's not going to make it through the day," a woman said softly, her voice laced with sadness. "I think he's already given up. Depression kills faster than disease. Ever since the fire, he's just gone." Aaliyah held her breath. "Who is it?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. The woman turned around, surprised to see a child standing there. "What are you doing here?" she asked gently. "I came to ask for something to eat, ma'am. But I heard what you said about the man," Aaliyah answered, her eyes wide and clear. A man in scrubs emerged from the side room, clipboard in hand. "What about him?" he asked, clearly irritated. Aaliyah took a deep breath. "I can help him." Both adults stared at her, baffled. "How exactly?" the woman asked, half curious, half skeptical. "I'll sing for him," Aaliyah said, calm and sure. The man burst into laughter. "This one? With her ripped hoodie and muddy feet?" But the woman didn't laugh. She looked at Aaliyah again, more closely this time. There was something in the girl's eyes, a calmness, a conviction. "It wouldn't hurt to try," the woman said slowly. "You can't be serious," the man frowned. "It won't cost us anything. And maybe, just maybe," she replied. And so, under the watchful eyes of curious nurses and a few disapproving glances from nearby doctors, Aaliyah was led down a long corridor, past glass walls and quiet rooms, into the hospital's most private wing. There, in a high-security recovery suite, William Hartley, the richest man in Massachusetts, who had lost his wife and daughter in a tragic house fire in Beacon Hill 2 years ago, lay unconscious. No visitors, no conversation, no food. He had refused life support. He had signed his will. He was ready to die. And now, standing beside his hospital bed, was a barefoot orphan. Aaliyah gently reached out and touched the cold metal rail of the hospital bed. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The song began like a soft morning breeze, slow, gentle, almost like a whisper in the dark. Aaliyah stood still beside the hospital bed, her eyes closed. Her lips moved gently, each note flowing out as if every syllable carried years of unspoken love and pain. There were no instruments, no backing track, just her voice rising like a prayer from an old soul in a young girl's body. Even if the sun forgets to rise, there's a fire still burning in your soul. Don't go where we can't follow. Come back! Come home! The atmosphere in the room shifted. The cold, suffocating air of despair slowly began to lift. In its place was something else, something warm, like sunlight peeking through a door long shut. The female doctor at the doorway froze. The male nurse, the one who had mocked Aaliyah in the hallway, found himself slowly stepping closer, as if drawn in by something he couldn't explain. Then A finger twitched. "Did you see that?" the doctor whispered, her voice shaky. "It's probably just a reflex," the nurse replied, though his voice had changed. Aaliyah kept singing. Her voice grew stronger, fuller. The words weren't just lyrics, they were light, reaching into the darkest corners of William's soul. Suddenly, a cough escaped his lips. Everyone in the room jolted. His eyes fluttered, then opened slowly, like someone waking from the longest sleep of their life. He saw Aaliyah. She was still singing, still standing there, her small hand holding the cold metal rail of the bed. And he watched her. A tear slipped down his cheek. And Aaliyah, for the first time in years, smiled at an adult without fear. It was the first smile she gave without flinching, without hiding. By the next morning, the story had spread throughout the hospital. Billionaire William Hartley has woken up. A little girl sang and brought him out of a coma. A miracle at 3 a.m. Doctors whispered. Nurses stared. Journalists began to gather outside the hospital gates. But none of them knew what had truly happened. Only a handful had witnessed the miracle inside that quiet room. And Aaliyah, the girl who had walked in with muddy feet, was now invited to stay. For the first time in years, she had her own room, a real bed, 3 warm meals a day, and a clean hospital gown that smelled like fresh linen. But Aaliyah asked for nothing, only one thing. "Can I sing for him again?" For the next 3 days, Aaliyah visited Mr. Williams' room every morning and evening. She didn't say much. She simply held his hand and sang. Sometimes, he drifted off peacefully in the middle of her song. Other times, he would open his eyes and just watch her, as if her voice reminded him of something long lost, something once beautiful, and once buried. On the 4th morning, William spoke. His voice was raspy and faint, but undeniably alive. "I don't know who you are, but your voice, it found me." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "You're awake," she whispered, her lips trembling. William gave a slow nod, managing a weak smile. "I'm not dead, am I?" Aaliyah shook her head, gripping his hand tighter. "I didn't let you die. Because someone in this world still needs you." William closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek. For the first time in 2 years, he wanted to live. Meanwhile, across the city, in the crowded, sun-baked Treme market, whispers had begun to spread. That Aaliyah girl, the one who used to carry tomatoes for Madame Nadine, they say she saved a billionaire in Boston. Some laughed, others believed, but none of the relatives who had abandoned her knew the full truth yet. Back at the hospital, a private meeting was called. The hospital director, the female doctor who had allowed Aaliyah in, and Mr. Williams' private attorney, Mr. Dempsey, sat around a conference table. "The girl has no guardian, no school record. She's been living under a bridge," the doctor reported. William, now sitting upright in his hospital bed, stared out the window, color returning to his face and his eyes clear. "And yet, she gave me something no medicine ever could. A reason to wake up." Mr. Dempsey leaned forward, his gaze sharp with understanding. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" William nodded slowly. "She saved me. Now it's my turn to save her." But just as the air was beginning to fill with hope, there was a knock at Aaliyah's hospital room door. A nurse answered it. Standing on the other side was a woman in a loud floral dress, heavy makeup, and eyes filled with bitterness and calculation. "Where's the girl?" she snapped. "Aaliyah?" the nurse asked, confused. "And you are?" "I'm her aunt, her only blood. And I want to see her. Right now." Behind the curtain, Aaliyah froze. That voice, she could never forget it. Aunt Denise. The same woman who had pointed at her during her parents' funeral with blazing eyes and shouted in front of the entire crowd, "That devil child killed my niece! No one walks out of a wreck like that unless they're cursed." Aaliyah's hands trembled. Her entire body wanted to disappear. It wasn't hunger or cold that terrified her now. It was the memory of being abandoned by her own flesh and blood. "I'm her aunt. I have a right to see her. I've been looking for her for 2 years," Denise shouted. The nurse frowned. "She's resting, and we don't allow visitors without approval." "I'm her blood," Denise hissed. Behind the curtain, Aaliyah clutched the hospital sheet. Her legs were about to give out. The door opened again. A tall man in a dark coat stepped in. He didn't speak, but the room immediately fell silent. His eyes were sharp, his stance steady. No oxygen mask, no wires, no machines. William Hartley had returned. "Excuse me," he said politely but firmly to Denise. "You say you're related to this girl?" Denise turned around and froze. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Hartley, you've recovered. Praise the Lord." He didn't smile. "I'll ask again. Who are you?" "I'm Aaliyah's aunt. Her family. I've been so worried. As soon as I heard, I rushed here." William looked at her, unblinking. "That's strange, because the child who saved my life told me her family left her on the streets, called her a witch, that they let her sleep under a bridge for 2 years. Would you happen to know anything about that?" Denise's smile faltered. "Kids, sometimes they make things up. You know how they are?" Then a small voice came from behind the curtain. "She's lying." All eyes turned. Aaliyah stepped out. Her hair was combed. Her clothes were clean. But her eyes, those were still the eyes of a child who had survived being forsaken by the world. "She called me a witch. Said, I killed my parents. She left me at their grave and never came back." Denise forced a tight smile. "Aaliyah, I was grieving. We all were. I didn't mean it. Number, you meant every word. And I never forgot." Silence filled the room. William turned to his security team. "Escort her out of here." Denise thrashed, shouting, "You'll regret this. She's just a street girl. She'll use you and throw you away." Aaliyah didn't flinch. And when William placed his hand on her shoulder, she didn't pull away. "You're safe now," he said quietly. That evening, in Mr. Williams' private recovery lounge at the hospital, a quiet room with warm yellow lighting and soft jazz humming from hidden speakers, Aaliyah sat curled up on a sofa, holding a cup of warm milk. William watched her silently, still barely believing it. The child who saved him from death was a girl the world had cast aside. "Aaliyah," he said gently, "may I ask you something?" "Yes, sir?" She looked up, eyes soft under the ceiling light. "Why did you sing for me? You didn't know me. You had no reason to save an old man like me." Aaliyah thought for a moment. "Because I saw myself in your eyes. I know what it feels like, to want to give up." Her voice was small, but steady. "But I once had a dream. In the dream, I sang to a dying man. He came back to life. He put his hand on my head and said, 'You're stronger than you think.'" William's throat tightened. And then Aaliyah added her words, soft but sharp like truth. "When I saw you, I just knew it was you. The man from my dream." William looked at her as if she were the answer to every prayer he had never dared to say out loud. "Then," he whispered, "I'll make your dream come true." The next morning, the paperwork was signed. An emergency adoption order was granted at the hospital. The media exploded. Homeless girl revives billionaire from coma, now his legal daughter. The internet lit up. Miracle girl, Angel Aaliyah, from bridge to billionaire's heir. But somewhere across Boston, a man gritted his teeth as he scrolled through the headlines. Clayton Hartley, William's cousin, once executive vice president of Hartley Group, sat stiffly in an old estate in Brookline, the news glowing on his laptop screen. He had been waiting for William to die, assuming he'd inherit everything. He used to hold shares, board influence, and trust from investors. Until the fire that took William's wife and daughter, and with them, his will to lead. Clayton had waited, for months, for years. And now, everything was being handed to a barefoot girl from under a bridge. Some street kid, living in my family's mansion? He hissed. Number, not happening. He turned to his assistant. Prepare the files. I'm not starting over. I'm ending this. That afternoon, in the Hartley estate, a quiet threat arrived. Aaliyah was in the library, learning how to use a basic flight simulator when the butler knocked gently. Miss Aaliyah, dinner is ready. Chef prepared your favorite jambalaya. She smiled and closed the laptop, heading downstairs. But when she lifted the lid of the rice dish, something stopped her. The smell. Too sharp. Too sour. Not right. She set the spoon down, frowning. Chef Ibrahim? She called. Did you cook this yourself? The middle-aged chef rushed in, took one whiff, and immediately shook his head. No, miss. You can't eat this. Something's wrong. The plate was sent to the family physician. Test results. Traces of rat poison. The entire household was in an uproar. William was furious. Anyone who touched this plate before it reached her stepped forward. Now. But no one spoke. Kitchen cameras disabled. The maid who served the food gone. She had resigned that very night and vanished without a trace. The next day, Aaliyah didn't sing. She didn't leave her room. She didn't open the flight software. She just sat there, in a sunlit room, that suddenly felt cold again. After the failed poisoning attempt, Aaliyah grew more withdrawn. She no longer hummed in the hallways. She stopped asking the butler questions about airplanes. She didn't touch the flight simulator. Something inside her had fractured. It wasn't fear of dying. It was a quiet, persistent question. What if my voice isn't enough to save anyone anymore? William noticed the change. One evening, he walked into her room. Aaliyah was curled up on her bed, staring out the window. Are you all right? He asked gently. She didn't answer right away. After a moment, she whispered, I think someone's trying to hurt me. William nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with weight. I know. Aaliyah turned to him, eyes wide. You knew? For the past 2 weeks, I've received 2 anonymous letters, he said. The first told me that if I didn't return the girl to the streets, things wouldn't stop with rice. The second warned, next time, it won't fail. Aaliyah felt a chill crawl down her spine. Do you know who's doing this? William clenched the armrest of the chair. I have a strong suspicion, and if I'm right, he's just getting started. Just a few days later, everything unraveled. At a special board meeting of Hartley Group, William Hartley suddenly collapsed mid-presentation. His heart raced erratically, breath labored, hands trembling. Call an ambulance! He's having a cardiac event! He was rushed to the ICU in critical condition. The media exploded. Billionaire relapses and returns to ICU. Is this the end for William Hartley? And while everyone was still reeling, Clayton made his move. A group of lawyers arrived at the Hartley estate, holding a thick legal folder. "We have a revised will, signed 3 weeks ago," one of them announced. According to the document, the entire estate properties, shares, management of the Hartley Foundation was to be temporarily transferred to one trustee, Clayton Hartley. Until Aaliyah turned 21, all financial and business decisions would go through him. The staff protested. The family doctor questioned the validity. But the paperwork? Sealed, signed, witnessed, legitimate-looking. And just like that, Aaliyah became a stranger in her own home. That evening, Clayton walked into the grand foyer with 2 suitcases, smiling like a king returning to reclaim his throne. "Your father's weak again," he said coldly. "And until he's gone, everything here belongs to me." Aaliyah stood in the hallway, eyes locked on his. The mansion, once her only sanctuary, now felt hollow. The walls were still white, the ceiling still high, but the air felt heavier than ever, like something was watching, waiting to pounce. Clayton ordered all family portraits removed. Photos of William, his late wife, even the one where William was holding Aaliyah in the garden the day he adopted her. "This house needs cleansing," he sneered. "Too much fake energy." Aaliyah said nothing, but deep inside, something stopped being afraid and started to burn. Meanwhile, in the ICU, William remained unconscious. The machines beeped steadily, his heart rate weak, breathing shallow. Doctors did everything they could, but back-to-back stress had worn his body thin. Every day, Aaliyah came. She sat beside him, held his hand like the first time. But this time, she didn't sing, because deep down, she was afraid of the question, "What if my voice can't bring him back this time?" So she, Saturday, silent, waiting, and afraid. That night, Aaliyah didn't sleep. Her instincts, the ones she'd sharpened while living under a bridge, dodging danger, avoiding thieves, came alive again. She heard footsteps outside her room around 2 a.m. A shadow passed, then paused near the guest wing. Clayton. Aaliyah slipped out quietly, barefoot, as silent as a cat. The guest room door was ajar. Inside, he was on the phone. She pressed her back to the wall, pulled out the mini recorder Mr. William had once given her, a small language learning device, and hit record. Inside, Clayton's voice rang out. "Once the old man dies, everything's mine. The new will's already in place. No one will question it. That girl, I'll send her right back where she came from. I don't care what it takes. William cannot wake up." Aaliyah held her breath. Her heart pounded in her chest. The truth was out. The next morning, the house felt tense. But Aaliyah? She was different. She wore a crisp white dress. Her hair was combed, her eyes calm and fierce. No longer the frightened child. She walked into the grand hall, holding the recorder. At her side were Mr. Dempsey, William's former lawyer, and a plainclothes investigator brought in by the family doctor after the poisoning. Clayton was at the breakfast table, reading the paper, sipping coffee. "Good morning, sweetheart," he sneered. "Still not talking? Or—" "No need to talk anymore, Uncle Clayton," Aaliyah said calmly. "I have something you might want to hear." She pressed play. The room froze. "Once the old man dies, everything's mine. William cannot wake up." Clayton's face turned ghostly. The lawyer dropped his file. The officer stepped forward, reaching for the handcuffs. "Mr. Clayton Hartley, you are under arrest for conspiracy to falsify a will, attempted poisoning of a minor, and intent to commit murder." "This is a setup!" Clayton screamed. "She planned this. She's manipulating all of you." But no one listened anymore. He was handcuffed right there, in the middle of the breakfast room. The proud expression he always wore shattered into panic and rage. Before being taken away, he turned back to Aaliyah, eyes full of venom. "You think you've won, kid?" "He's not waking up." Aaliyah didn't flinch. "I don't have to think," she said quietly, staring straight into his eyes. "I know I will bring him back." That night, Aaliyah returned to the hospital. The ICU was just as before. The steady beep of machines. William still lay motionless. She pulled up the chair beside him and took his hand. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, Aaliyah began to sing. Not a lullaby, not a morning song, but a call to rise. "You gave me a name when I had none. You gave me a home when I was cold. Now don't go where I can't follow. There's still laughter here, still skies to fly." Her voice soared like sunlight breaking through a storm. A single tear slipped down from William's eye. His fingers curled. Aaliyah's heart raced. She kept singing, until his eyes opened. "Aaliyah," he whispered, his voice raw but real. Tears streamed down her face. "You came back," she whispered. "I never left." News of William's second miraculous recovery spread like wildfire. Billionaire William Hartley returns from the brink again. Young girl's voice brings dying tycoon back to life once more. Meanwhile, Clayton Hartley was formally charged with 3 felony counts: forging a will, attempted poisoning, and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Social media hailed it as the Great Reversal. Aaliyah didn't just survive, she triumphed. Years later, Aaliyah was now 17 years old. From a muddy-footed child in an oversized hoodie, she had become the youngest licensed pilot in Massachusetts, having completed the aviation program at the Boston Flight Academy. Each time she took off, she remembered that first night singing to a man who everyone else had already given up on. Together with William, she launched Sing to Heal, a nonprofit that used music as a healing tool for those battling trauma and depression. It became a haven for voices once silenced by pain, now singing to uplift others. "A voice isn't just for performing," Aaliyah said in a live-streamed Q&A. "It's a lifeline, a bridge between despair and hope." And a few years after that, Aaliyah married Marcus Johnson, a young therapist who once volunteered at Sing to Heal. They had twin boys, Jaden and Joshua, always full of questions like, "Mom, is it true you used to sleep under a bridge?" She just smiled and pulled them close. "I had to start underground, so I'd know how to soar later." The Hartley estate in Beacon Hill was no longer silent. The grand living room, once haunted by echoes, now rang with laughter and music. The ICU room where William once lay unresponsive, now transformed into a healing studio where survivors sang weekly to those still finding their voices. William, now fully recovered, had stepped back from business, but not from life. He often told guests at charity galas, "Don't call her a miracle. Miracles fade. The truth endures. And the truth is, she saved me with a heart that knew how to sing." One day, on stage at Harvard University, Aaliyah faced a packed auditorium. She stood tall, her curly hair tied neatly, her eyes as bright as that night she refused to give up. "I was once called a witch for surviving," she began. "I used to sing in the dark, not so others could hear, but so I wouldn't break. But today, I sing to tell you this. Your voice, even if small, trembling, or cracked, can still open doors the world thought were locked forever. If you're at rock bottom, don't stay silent. Sing, because what feels like an ending might just be your beginning." When a 10-year-old orphan sang softly to a dying billionaire, no one expected what would happen next. This is the extraordinary true story of Aaliyah, a girl with nothing but a voice and a heart, and William Hartley, a man with everything but hope. In a world where silence can be fatal, she chose to sing. And that decision changed both of their lives forever. Stay until the end. The final speech will stay with you. Based on true events. Inspired by real stories of survival and connection.